Hi everybody, Melissa here, and today's class is called Growing a Self-Love Garden. And so this will be a bit of a educational presentation as well as some journaling questions at the end. And so of course, feel free to take notes and you will have a copy of this as well. And so let's go ahead and get started. And so Yoga Sutra 1.33 says, by cultivating attitudes of friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and disregard toward the wicked, the mind stuff retains its undisturbed calmness. And so this may be seen as one of the goals of yoga. Our intention toward others, as well as our intention toward ourselves, can help our mind to stay more calm and less disturbed in its everyday operation. And so this is really important when we talk about self-love, because self-love is also a practice, one that we cultivate that requires specific attitudes. So let's get in a little bit to why self-love. And so, as we may know, we live in a world that is dominated by messages that we are not enough. We are constantly being sold creams and tinctures and supplements, weight loss remedies, all sorts of things that says we're too much or we're not enough. And all of this kind of comes to this idea of an end consumer where we are able to purchase happiness. We're able to purchase something that allows us to like ourselves. And so in this day and age, self-love is a radical act of defiance. It says, I am enough, I will love myself as I am, and I'm willing to strive toward who I may be. And self-love is not an excuse to be a narcissist. Self-love is a container for self-possession, which means we accept ourselves and also take responsibility for ourselves. So that may mean acknowledging our privilege, acknowledging where we have work to do, acknowledging the ways where we may be harmful to others, and taking responsibility to correct our actions. And so self-love is not an excuse to disregard others. So keeping that in mind, self-love requires some other verbs or self-ideas. So it also requires self-compassion and self-understanding. And now that self-compassion piece is so important because that allows us to recognize that we are human, that we will make mistakes, and that we are learning, growing, and always attempting to do better with the knowledge we acquire throughout our life. And now this self-compassion requires as well self-understanding, that we have to recognize that our faults, our weaknesses, our strengths do not define us. We are multifaceted human beings, and our abilities, our attitudes, our understanding will change with the passage of time, with relationships that come and go and enter our life, with life transitions. That who we are is not a permanent fixed point. And we are always going to be on a journey of learning to understand ourselves, provide our self-compassion, and continue to grow our self-love. And so how do we practice self-love? Well, as I mentioned before, self-love cannot be consumed. It is not a spa day. It's not a shopping spree. It's not something that you can acquire. It is a practice. It requires nurturing what we love, rejecting that which does not serve us, holding ourselves accountable to both our dreams and our goals, as well as the reality in which we are currently living and working in. It also requires deep inner work on both our light and shadow self, because we are both. It also requires a commitment to hold ourselves and others to our highest and best. And so self-love is something that is an ongoing process. It's not something that we figure out in a day, that is done from one presentation, one journaling exercise, one practice. It is ongoing and it is ever changing. And so this is one of my favorite Sanskrit prayers. It is typically from the end of the Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga chant. And this says, "May all beings be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and freedom for all." And so I love this so much that I actually tattooed it onto my left arm, because I think that this is really an idea of how our self-love, our self-compassion, our self-possession can contribute to greater freedom, to greater sense of community, to a greater worldwide happiness for all. Because our thoughts, words, and actions and the way in which we live our life does affect others. And so the more self-love we can cultivate within, the more self-love we can perpetuate throughout. And so on that same idea, self-love does not deny. It is not a practice of rejecting others. It is simply rejecting that which does not serve. So self-love is a community practice. You cannot practice self-love and disavow someone else's ability to do so. So self-love requires expanding freedom to all others so that the self can be more free. We must remember that self-love is a radical act of community care. The more I'm able to love and hold myself accountable, the more I am able to understand myself, the better I will be able to understand you and offer you empathy and compassion in your times of need. So self-love is not a form of narcissism. It is not purely hedonistic. It is not just a masturbatory practice in which we forgo the needs of others. Self-love is the big S self. It is the care for our planet, our communities, for those around us. It is care for others wherever they may be. And so when do we practice self-love? Well, self-love is an ongoing, regular practice. We don't just wake up one day and say, now I practice self-love, or now I have accomplished self-love. It has no endpoint and it has no true beginning. It is not a thing to be mastered. It is simply a lifelong practice. There's no checklist. And in truth, self-love is small moments. It's where we may recognize that we have been criticizing ourselves harshly and we redirect our thoughts. It is helping to improve our self-talk. It is understanding and believing in our abilities. It is our ever-expanding ability to be who we are. And so self-love is kind of an ephemeral thing. I don't mean to make it sound so mysterious, but it's truly unique to each individual. What may be self-love for one may be a practice that is very easy and requires very little effort for another. And so self-love may be having routines, making sure that you do a gentle yoga practice every night before bed after you brush your teeth and wash your face. Self-love may be making yourself healthy meals. Self-love may be taking a moment to journal every day. Self-love may be the time you take to sit and read. Self-love can look like many different things, and it can be a shifting practice. So self-love is not a purely defined type of practice that we can do. It is our overall relationship to ourself. And so some ideas to consider from our presentation is, what does self-love mean to you? I've hopefully given you a lot of ideas of how to think about self-love, and hopefully a lot of ideas of what self-love is not. But what does it mean to you? And what would it look like to practice self-love? Also, how do you currently practice self-love? What are your practices now, your routines, your habits? Which ways do you make sure that you know that you love yourself? And then finally, with some of the ideas perhaps that you have gained from this presentation, What would you like your self-love to look like? What kind of things would you change? What kind of things would you add or subtract? Because self-love can also look like rejecting some things. Maybe no longer trying to diet, and instead just focusing on eating food that is healthy and nourishing and not restricting calorie intake. Maybe self-love for you looks like trying to quit smoking, or letting yourself join a gym and starting to move your body more regularly. Whatever self-love may look like, it is not defined by social standards. Your self-love is unique to you. So take some time to ponder these questions, journal them, and then after a little while, revisit your responses and observe what you've maybe done differently, what has changed for you. And know that these are all yoga practices, that nurturing this self-love, nurturing our ability to care for ourselves and thus our communities, is an important aspect of the relationship that we have through our yoga. And so as TKV Desikachar says, in sum, Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, suggests that we channel our curiosity and our mental powers into areas of fruitful interest as a means of calming the mind. So exploring the self-love practices that help us to feel nourished, to help us to feel childlike, to help us to rest and wonder, are all aspects of yoga that help us to heal, to help us to grow and expand into our best self. So maybe self-love looks like taking some time to color every day. Whatever that may mean to you, whatever piques your curiosity, whatever is a fruitful interest of yours, know that that practice of calming the mind is a beautiful exercise in self-love. And so if you take anything from this presentation, please remember that you are so worthy of your own love, and you are so loved. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'd love to hear what your experience of this practice was like and how you may be thinking differently about self-love. Take care, and I will speak with you again soon. Bye.